Hey guys, I'm Nashwa. Welcome back to my channel. And this has been a very interesting and exciting Zoom call that I've been wanting to do because I have found a Pakistani book that I really like. And I somehow convinced the author, Haroon Khalid Akhtar, to join me. Assalamu alaikum, Haroon. How are you?
Alaikum salam. Very well. Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to come on my channel and agreeing to do this brief interview with me. I've been trying to read, as I was mentioning before, more Pakistani fiction. And your book has been one of those books that I immediately, as soon as I started reading it, I was like, this is definitely going to go somewhere for me. I'm really going to enjoy it. So you are a banker by profession, as I understand it, but you've been in the banking sector for about 20 years. So how did you come up with the idea for this book?
There's a long story to it and a long short story to it as well. But yes, bankers are not supposed to write books, and certainly not fiction. But it so happened was that my first love, if you put it this way, has always been books. My late father was an eminent Urdu writer, Muhammad Khalid Akhtar. One of his famous books is Chaki Wada Mein Misal. So all throughout our childhood, we were exposed to the environment of books, the smell of books, the fragrances of books, and that is how that interest in books kind of grew. So the interest was always there, and also not only the interest, but the kind of importance that was given to a book in our house was amazing. So my father used to work in Wabda in Lahore, basically from Lahore, and he had that day job, and then also he had the other life, which was amongst the writers and his friends. And it was as a child growing up, I found it very fascinating to how he was very close to books, how he liked that environment, that kind of circle, and how he used to write actually. So that fascination kind of got instilled in me. And when I did my MBA from LAMS, in fact, before that, I had already started writing for Dawn. I was writing articles, satires, some short stories as well. And then it kind of came to a point where uh, I thought it's a good time to have a collection printed. So my first book was Threadbare. I had it self-printed, self-published through City Press, which is still Ajmal Kamal's publishing house. And then after that, I felt that urge, and more precisely, actually, my wife pushed me towards that, and she said, "It's your articles are hinting that you can write a novel." And I was arguing with her that I'm not the guy who will be able to stretch a story that long. So it's not in me. But she pushed me. Actually, the credit goes to her. She pushed me, and then it so happened that I started building that story. I had certain ideas in my mind, started building on them, and then that's a long story how this kind of evolved the whole book. But very briefly, it was a lot of toil, a lot of hard work, a lot of rewriting, and finally it ended up in the form of the book that you saw and read.
I think we all owe your wife a really big thank you from as a reader, because if it wasn't for her, we would definitely be without the book that I read. Because it's just, for me, the things that I took from it. One of the things that I kind of noticed was that this would be a very polarizing book because it wouldn't be for everyone. Because readers are very different. But for me, it was a very fresh and very interesting book that I haven't read something similar coming from, especially from a Pakistani writer. So if you had to briefly describe the synopsis of your book, what is this story about?
This is a story, I think this is a story which is based on feelings. And I'm a strong believer that if you're writing something, it should come out very honestly. So it's a story of friendship and sacrifice as well, and also a story of extremities. It's setting certain standards about friendship and sacrifice. This is if you're indulging in love, then there has to be certain standard setting. It's not that It's very simple. You have to really commit through and through in a very major way to prove that you are committed. Similarly, for friendships, as Waris, you would have read that he is willing to sacrifice his most precious thing, and that is how a true friend should behave. So, Synopsis is basically it's a story of three individuals, and Zara is obviously raised as a tomboy in a very extreme form, so she's totally confused what her priorities are, and she is enticed by a gentleman called Zaid, who has something precious as seen by Zara uh, in his possession, which is basically a tear. And then the story unfolds how he chases that tear and the story and the past behind that tear. And uh, she's led to a very crumbling mansion, which is Sufed Koti, where she finds Waris, and Waris is somebody who helps her a lot in actually entangling the whole mystery behind the tear and helping Zara actually dig out what secrets Zaid has in his past. And then the story obviously goes along, and then there are a lot of sacrifices. Just in the middle, as you would have read, that narrator changes in surprisingly, and suddenly then there's a shock that whoever was telling a story.
So now I want to ask you, like, what was your writing process? Because you said it took you a very long time, and with your full-time job in a completely different sector, how did you come up with? What was your process? What were some of the things, including the rewrites and the drafts? Like, what are some of the details that you wrote down, and you're like, maybe I need to take this out, maybe I need to change this. So if you could shed a little bit of light on your writing process.
Writing process, my first novel. I was writing articles, as you know, and this was different. So I started with an idea that was closer to the story, but then realized that uh, it's not the right start. It's not the right voice. So I went back, made it as a first-person narrative. I thought it was giving me the flow that I wanted in the story. And then again, the chapters that I wrote was not the chapters that I could begin the story with. So there was a lot of going back and forth. And it so turned out that I ended up writing and rewriting lots of chapters just to fix the arrangement. So that was challenge number one. Challenge number two was that as I started, continued writing, I became very, very finicky. And I thought every line has to really measure out properly. And that, Anashwa, actually became a very, very tedious process. So I was continuously writing and rejecting. And it took a great while. Tough day job combined with this rejection, self rejection happening. So it went on for lots of years actually. So you have to appreciate what time I was actually writing in. After all, bank's jobs are really tough. These are not the jobs that probably my father used to do in Wabda when he was off by 4 o'clock. And that explains why he was able to write so much more. But for me, it was very tough. I used to come home, then sit with my family. My mother was alive at that time. And after 9 was the time. And that's a very uh, tiring time to write anything fresh. So what could have written in an hour actually stretched out to 3 hours, and then I had started would have I kind of dozed off. So and then I thought fine I had needed to find some time, so I actually started to write it in office in the first hour when I used to settle in my desk, and I thought I can skip the newspapers and I can just start writing. But that didn't work out either because
What did work out?
there were actually people who were actually coming in, and I felt odd that I was probably stealing something out of office, and I was actually stealing their time. So what worked out was weekends end to end, good stretch I got on those weekends. And at the end of the day, I think lots of weekends combined with some time stolen out of office and some late night writing, some early morning writings as well, but unfortunately I couldn't do so much as I would have liked. That's by the way is the best time you can write anything.
Right.
Well, because that's when your mind is fresh, and that's my advice to everybody who is intending to be writer. Is going to be,
Right.
please try to wake up early and write. That's the best time to write.
I will take that advice as someone who aspires to write something someday. Because we all, like, I feel like every person who is a reader has at the back of their minds, okay, this is a natural progression for us, that if you grow up reading, then you want to, essentially, maybe not everyone, but most people would like to create something of their own from their own imagination. But one thing that you mentioned is that you had a lot of self-doubt in the way that you were writing and rewriting, and when I'm writing my reports for work, that self-doubt is still there, but then I can edit it out and it's not a book that's going out into the world. So how does one convince themselves that this writing is actually, I'm happy with this, I don't doubt myself? Like, how do you come to the realization that I've written this and I've spent a lot of time on it, like you don't end up doubting it anymore? What is, how does one come to over, how does one overcome self-doubt?
So how this process uh, goes along and develops, I'll tell you very honestly. First phase of this novel writing is that you feel actually that you have written something wondrous, and you feel that this is the ultimate book that you've written, ultimate story that you're writing, and you're in the process of getting self-impressed. I think this is a kind of a natural thing, but it's not probably desirable. And sooner or later you'll be found out. If you're not finding out yourself, somebody else will let you know. And it so happened in my case as well. I initially I was getting a lot of praise for my article, so I thought, okay, I'm building a story, and I used to present it to a couple of friends, and with looking at their faces, that they will say, "Wow, what fantastic!" And that kind of didn't come back to me, and they were saying, "Okay, it's good, fine." And they used to touch some other subject, and that is the hurt that you should get. All good writers should get this hurt.
Right.
If they're naturally gifted writers, fine, they might be doing wonderful writing straight away. But I think this is a natural process which will happen to everybody. They will be impressed, and then the world will tell them that this is not good enough. And that's when your ego will be hurt, and that's when you have to raise the game, and when you have to take that hit very, very positively.
Right.
And I think that's what happened in my case. In the initial phase, when I realized that probably this is not the standard that I thought it contained, then I was hurt in a very positive way, and then I became the biggest critic of myself.
Right.
Than anybody else. I was writing, and then I was rejecting, and then I was trying to uh, write every line that I felt should stand out, and that became my motto actually. That every line should be something that should be remarkable enough,
Right.
and that's where a lot of pain went to into the novel.
Right. I'm really glad that you mentioned that you were able to take feedback positively. I think it's very important that you mentioned the process of feedback, because I feel like feedback is critical, and especially for new and young writers. That if you get negative feedback, it does not mean that you can't write. You should shut down your project. Instead of, you should really focus on what needs to be improved. And I feel like feedback in terms of the way that I work is very important, because I get a lot of comments on my YouTube videos, which are sometimes like, you need to raise the volume, or sometimes you need to talk a little slower. So I think feedback is basically very important for you to improve a certain project. For new and aspiring writers, I think it's very, very important that they need to take that feedback not to heart, in a way, take it negatively, but in a way that helps them improve their work. So I really appreciate the fact that you brought it up, that feedback is something that really helped you improve your writing. Now I want to ask you about some of your writing influences. You grew up in a house full of books. Your father was a great writer of his time. So, but in contemporary fiction, latest books, what are some of your favorite books, I would like to ask, and what are some things that kind of influenced you into writing this kind of story?
I've read all the classics since my
Right.
childhood. So that's Charles Dickens and Bronte sisters. Fine, but two of the recent books that impressed me a lot. One was The English Patient,
Right.
very very lyrical, by Michael Ontaji, and that's a book I have read twice, despite my tough job and writing. And the movie is very nice as well. The book is even nicer. The writer is basically a poet, so it's a very different style of writing, and a lot of beautiful lines in them. And it's a World War II story. And the other book that really impressed me was Arundhati Roy's God of Small Things, and that was also a remarkable feeling. It was very evocative. It uh, is the kind of writing that I can appreciate. It brings out a lot of feelings, and it's a sad story, but it has its laughing moments. So I think anybody who is aspiring to write must first read good literature
Right.
before actually embarking on these kind of ventures. Uh, what you think is good enough might not be good enough to the world. Set very high standard for yourselves and read what is best out there. I'll give you an example that sometimes we listen to music and sometimes we watch plays and we think this is the ultimate play that we watching. There's a Turkish play going on and that the whole country is glued to,
Unfortunately obsessed with.
terribly obsessed with. And I'm a movie buff as well. I that's my biggest entertainment. So there are really outstanding works out there, and our nation and our youth especially need to compare ourselves and aspire for something that is great out there.
Right.
And we should not measure ourselves and our outputs against what is just out there on our TV shows. This is not good. And this music, for example, we think that fine, this music is also very close to my heart. But music has to be of high standard too. And music should inspire you, fine, but music should not be fluffy. A lot of literature that is now has certainly started coming out in Pakistan is fluffy literature. So it's fine to write Mills and Boons kind of stuff, but those young writers must grow as and to aspire for writing something which is of of better quality as well. So this is a journey how I think everybody should continue with. And the two books that I mentioned are one of my all-time favorites and remarkable books. And I think there's so much good literature out there actually. With my job, my father was a voracious reader. He read everything that was there out in the planet, but I couldn't do that because of my very stressful job. But I actually read a lot during my initial years, during my college days, school days. But now my reading has kind of shrunk to The Economist, which I read very, very religiously every week. At, at enhances my, it helps me in my job as well. Besides, it has some excellent articles on all subjects. And well, I guess the collection that you have behind your back,
Yes. My pride and joy.
your pride and joy, and I like the style that you have arranged it. It's a slanting bookshelf, and it shows me some very good collection. If I can read some
I
names.
have all of Bapsi Sidhwa's works because Bapsi Sidhwa, I feel like I recognize her as like the ultimate standard for Pakistani writers. There has not been a single book that she has written which hasn't evoked some kind of an emotion in me. And I feel like if I'm looking for a book and I measure its quality by now, not how it's well written, because of course that counts in the grammar and how correct it is, because I've recently also noticed this trend that books are somehow not edited. And with her book, every book I have a special relationship with that. Like I pick up certain things from certain books. So I feel like for me, Bapsi Sidhwa is definitely one of those writers I would like probably remember for the rest of my life. And I keep, like you mentioned, you read The English Patient twice. I have read The Crow Eaters about 3 times now because I'm just like I need not all of it, but certain chapters because I'm like I just for me that's my personal opinion that she's one of the best. She's the first writer who wrote in English, so I have become a little bit obsessed with her. But I think her contribution to Pakistani literature is something that I'm really, really happy that I have discovered recently.
So that is true. Vapsi Sidhwa is in a different league, basically. She is the original, first of all, and the quality I've read, The Ice Candy Man, is remarkable writing, absolutely. And it's not as you, I think, mentioned earlier in one of your videos that I saw, it's not targeted writing, actually. So it's writing in a very original form. It's not, there's no terrors, obviously, and no diaspora writing as
Right,
the word
right.
come up. So it's very original, and I think all aspiring writers should start reading Babsi Silva if they want to actually set their standards high. So yes, I think good writers here in Pakistan do have are there, and also a lot of richness in Urdu writing as well. So we
Absolutely.
have this base in our culture, in our DNA, if you will, in Pakistan, where we have been producing good writers, good thoughts, and it's comparable with the world's best literature.
Absolutely.
But somehow I think our literature has got branded and is narrowed, as seen as a narrowed version of diaspora writing. And all the people who have made it big are actually sitting elsewhere outside Pakistan. And all those original stories that we could have projected to the world are not getting projected. So this is where I think a lot of young writers have to come forward.
I absolutely agree with you. Not that I'm a young aspiring writer who will make it big in the world, but with the fact that I personally had a lot of qualms with Pakistani fiction, which is why I took on this project that I wanted to read more. And because, like you said, the diasporic authors who are sitting elsewhere writing about Pakistan. And I was discussing this with someone that I have never read a book that was set in Islamabad. And for me, I've born and raised here. Why is it that I've never read? Why is it that I've never seen my own city represented in it? So it is that strange like disconnect between the fiction that we read, which is internationally lauded. Everybody knows about certain books that have made it big and they've won big prizes, but I do have certain issues, and I feel like we as readers have every right to talk about the issues that we see in books, because we want good fiction coming out of Pakistan. We want stories that actually represent us as a country, as a community, because we can't stick to two themes and then keep writing about them. We wring them dry and then there's nothing, and that's what people expect Pakistan to be like. So I would like to read more stories which are more representative. But Babsi Sidhwa is absolutely one of my favorite writers. But I think for me, you are close in the league because your book has inspired me in a way which I was like, this is absolutely brilliant. It is authentic. It is original. It is something that, it gave me hope that I was glad I was able to discover it. And one of the reasons that I did want to invite you to my channel and talk about it, because I wanted people to see how great Pakistani fiction can be. And we have this new generation of writers who are producing books which are not about terrorist attacks. They're not about certain themes. They are dark in a different tone, in a different way, but they're not trying to, represent a certain image of the country. So for me, I feel like your book has been one of those which I've read, but I will definitely be talking about for the rest of the year at least, and then probably into 2021.
First of all, very kind words. Thank you very much. You see, this is, candidly speaking, this is tonic for a writer. Getting some kind of gushing feedback. I'm grateful.
No, it was well deserved.
No, thank you very much. Basically, one thing about writing before I answer your question is briefly that I mentioned writing from feeling. There's certain two and three important ingredients in novel writing, fiction writing. One is that uh, are you able to translate your emotions into the book? Then your story actually also has to be interesting. You see,
Right.
you can write wonderful, beautiful prose, and then it's not going anywhere. That's not good enough. So think of those pearls that you have in your mind, in your subconscious, and anchor your story before even writing the first line. Anchor your story in a way on those gems that you think are going to really be different and very, very original. Have 3 4 5 points that will actually appear in your story, about which you feel very strongly about and you get motivated about, you can emotionally motivated about. And then story, if you can figure that out, then the important thing is how you actually start leading towards one point A and point B and point C. So how you flow the story. So translation of feeling into the lines, the best way to do it, actually, you'll get to know when you're writing and you're feeling, you will get this response from your body, sometimes from your eyes,
Right.
that this is the line, this is now, that's I'm stirred. So you get this after your initial few months, you start getting this feedback.
Right.
So probably you don't need any other feedback, because you will know that you have, this is some written for the sake of it. This line is passage is for the sake of it. It's not leading towards anywhere. And when I talk about feeling, it's also about humor. It's not only about writing some about your sentiments only, but it's also about good humor, how you're actually putting that, installing that humor into the flow of the story.
Right.
So story, feeling, and the flow, three important things
Right.
for
And
me.
that's very, very valuable advice, firstly, for me. But anyone who is aspiring to write, you have to remember that this is coming from a published author whose book I really liked. So for anyone who has similar taste to mine, firstly, you need to pick up Melody of a Tear. And if you are aspiring to write, then I think you should listen to the author of this book, who came up with absolutely one of my favorite books of the year. So again, I would like to ask you that the book has gone into reprint. When is it coming out? So in case anybody wants to order it internationally and locally, because I feel like Liberty Books in Pakistan would be able to provide you.
Internationally, it's already available. It was published in India. Nayogi Books published it in 2019. So it was spread out, fanned out across the globe, available on Kindle, and it's available physically as well. So a lot of people have bought it in America, UK, and Canada. It's available everywhere. And in Pakistan, the reprint, I think, is going to be there in a couple of days,
Right.
probably from Monday onwards. The banner is already there on Liberty Books website, so it's there. And thank you very much. You informed about the pre-order.
Right.
You did that, and so it's going to be available in a couple of days. There's an issue between Pakistan and India. A lot of people might not be aware. All the books, Pakistani authors' books published in India, are not getting to Pakistan, because there is a government restriction of not actually uh, selling any merchandise in Pakistan that has a stamp of India. So all the shops in Pakistan are having this problem. Uh, Liberty is also having this problem. So it's not my problem alone. It's a problem of all the Pakistani authors who've been published in India.
Right. And unfortunately, that's something that really limits the work that you're trying to share, because not a lot of people can access it, probably because of that. Haroon, thank you so much for coming on my channel. This has been a very, very valuable video for me to do, because I'm hoping this would be the first in my series of conversations with you, because I would like to invite you back for if you ever want to come for a chat about any books. It can be generally about Pakistani fiction, because I would love to have you back to have another conversation about books. This has been a really great experience for me. So I will leave the links for Liberty Books if you want to buy it in Pakistan. By the time this video is published, the book is hopefully already released, so I'll leave the link for that. And I will also have the international link below, in case because a lot of my subscribers are not from Pakistan. So internationally, if you want to order it, I will leave the link for that. So thank you so much for coming. It was really, really a pleasure for me to have you on this platform.
Thank you very much, Nashwa. I'm grateful for having me, and it was a lovely chat. Really enjoyed it. Look forward to further, I think, encounters in future.
Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you guys soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.